Hello everyone and welcome back. It's another Flashback Friday and today I'm going to be taking another look at Hasbro's 12-inch Star Wars line, and by special request from Odin Anon, I've managed to track down the Imperial Officer. So let's get started. If you've seen any of my other recent videos on this series such as Zuckuss or Mace Windu, this packaging will look very familiar to you. Of course, it has that sort of blue, ephemeral kind of quality to it. I don't know quite how to describe this. I really struggle to articulate this in each of my videos because it's definitely blue themed. I think it's meant to be sort of a gradient between the sky and the stars. There's a lot of like white lines running over it, which I'm not quite sure what that's meant to be. But of course, at the bottom of the packaging, we have the Star Wars logo, and we have Luke's hands gripping the lightsaber from that classic 1977 poster. The rest, of course, is window display, so we can see the figure inside, and it looks pretty cool. And then on the side panel, we have this image that's meant to be a screenshot of the character from which this figure is based on. Now, this is a generic Imperial Officer. I have to say that the image on the side of the box does not correlate with the figure that we see inside, and we'll take a close look at that in a moment. And also, I'm pretty sure that this officer and this still is actually taken from Return of the Jedi, and yet on the packaging it clearly states The Empire Strikes Back. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. And then if we look at the reverse of the packaging, again, this will look very, very familiar. We have a little bit of information about The Empire Strikes Back, a little bit of bio about the Imperial Officer, and then we have this sort of blued out image of the character. I'm not a huge fan of this approach. It always looks a little bit, a bit wishy-washy, a bit ephemeral. It's not quite clear, it's not very clearly defined. But hey, it still serves, it's still relatively attractive, and I still really love the fact that we have the other figures in this wave listed at the bottom of the packaging. I've always loved that, and I think it works really well. And here's the interior card inlay once we remove it from the packaging and take the figure out. So you can see that this is again a blued out image of the interior of a Star Destroyer or perhaps even the Death Star, I'm not entirely sure. Either way, I really like this approach. I like that they've actually bothered to do something with the inlay here and make sure that it ties thematically to the character, almost like a mini diorama, I suppose. I think this is really cool thematically. Again, I'm not a huge fan of this sort of blue wash they've run over it. It just looks, strange to me. But otherwise, a really nice idea. Onto the figure himself, and I have to say, for a fairly generic, anonymous character, they've done a tremendous job with this figure. I really, really like it. It definitely benefits from a lot of the innovations that Hasbro were making at this time. But first up, we've got to address the elephant in the room, which is this likeness, this head sculpt. I think it's a good head sculpt. It definitely reminds me of someone, but I'm not quite sure who. But bearing in mind it's supposed to be this character, and I've got to be honest, I searched and searched and searched to try and find this character's name, and I couldn't find one on IMDb, so I might be missing something really obvious. I'm sure this character has a name, but I can't find it for the life of me. So if you know, please let me know in the comments because it's driving me mad. But anyway, this is the character that's on the packaging itself, on both the front and the back of the box, and yet obviously it clearly bears very little resemblance to the figure that we have in hand. This is a completely different face, so I'm not sure what's going on here. Something's got a little bit skew with, I think, and I'm not sure whether it's down to likeness rights, being able to get permission from the actor. I don't know what happened, but there's something slightly off here. But all that being said, this is still a pretty good sculpt of whoever it's meant to be. I do like that there's actually quite a lot of detail. This is a very distinctive face, and they've actually done a nice job when it comes to the paint apps as well. We can see obviously nice detailing in the eyes there. The brown paint they've used for the hair is maybe a little bit too glossy. It's a little bit too reflective for my liking. I wish it'd been more of a matte, but other than that, I think this is really quite nicely done. I really like the tailoring on this figure. They've used a very thin cotton, so it has quite a nice texture to it. It feels a little bit different to some of the other figures we've had in the line so far, but it's very nicely fitted as well. It looks like a nice tight uniform as it should be on this particular character. So this works really well. I do like the individual badge at the top there. I like that this is a separate piece that's been sewn in. I think this looks really cool, and again, it's nice to have lots of depth and texture to our figures. So this is actually really good, and the same is true of the rubber belt that is wrapped around his waist. Likewise, I really love how they've managed to capture the sort of flared legs of these characters. I think they've done a really great job here with the tailoring to really recreate this effect. It looks really sharp and, yeah, really on point, very authentic, and quite an interesting achievement actually for the time. So I think they've done a really good job with this. Likewise, massive improvement when it comes to the boots. You all know by now, if you see my other videos, that I've never been a huge fan of the approach they took to those really big, thick, heavy rubber boots that they used to give these figures. These are still rubber, but they're much thinner, they're glossy, and they just look much tighter in proportion with the rest of the figure. So all in all, this looks really good. Also, very important to note that he has the improved articulation in the hands. These are plastic hands, and he has the finger articulation. And speaking of articulation, he has a fantastic ball joint in the neck that allows the head to move from side to side, lean left and right, and even nod up and down. I love this. I think this is a fantastic bit of improvement in this line. Of course, he's got ball joints in the shoulders as well, so the arms will lift up and out. And as you can see, there's actually a pin swivel at the elbow as well. So that lower forearm will rotate around, and it will also hinge to 90 degrees. Then he's got a pin swivel at the wrist, so of course the hand will rotate all the way around, and it will hinge forwards and backwards. There is articulation in the waist. It feels like a ball joint, but it can only really move from side to side. It can't really lean left or right or bend forwards and backwards. Now there's ball joints in the hips, so the legs will kick out to the side, and of course they'll kick forwards, backwards, and as you can see, there is a single joint at the knee there as well, allowing that lower leg to kick back to just past 90 degrees actually. As you might expect from this line, he's pretty light on accessories, but he does have his hat and his blaster. The hat is made of plastic, so it's very solid, again nicely sculpted, and where there's paint this works really well, and it fits nice and easily onto his head, and actually pretty securely too. I also really like the blaster, and this is the first time that I've actually owned this in my collection. I don't know whether this is ever used on any other figures, but it's the only one that I've got currently, and I really like this mold, so I think they've done a really good job at this. This definitely feels different to the other figures. It would have been easy to give him that blaster rifle that we've had many times before, so glad that they've created something new here. And as you can see, he has no problems holding this in his grip, which of course you can now articulate to fit very snugly around this. So this works really well. I think it looks really cool. My only criticism of this weapon is the scope is actually removable, and it does have a tendency to want to pop off, and I'm not sure why it wasn't all molded as one piece. All in all then, for a very minor background character to this series, I think they've done a really great job with this Imperial Officer. In fact, I'd say he's probably one of the best in terms of just articulation and just general proportions. Everything looks right. In fact, this is a lot closer to what we'd see in coming years from burgeoning lines from the likes of Sideshow Collectibles. His accessories are fun, his costume is accurate, it's nicely fitted, overall the presentation is really very nicely done, and then we have this improved articulation as well, giving us a lot more flexibility, a lot more options when it comes to posing these figures. So a really fantastic addition to this line actually, and a nice foreshadowing of what was to come. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.